£18.10. It was made the Epsom Cine Society and was affiliated to the IAC on the August 31st, 1953. If you looked in the bar, you could see the original certificate of membership.
He's an optimist. He's an optimist because Ian has just been complaining to my wife that when he's speaking to me, he can't get a word in edgeways.
A few words.
So there's an awful lot of you know, half-truths and whatnot going about how the club actually started, and most people date it from the meeting at the White Hart. In fact, it started before then. Let me tell you, in February 1952, I was 24 and broke, but I managed to raise 15 quid to go to Wood's, the camera shop in Water Road, Epsom, and I bought a second-hand 9.5mm Pathoscope H. I'd always been mad keen on going to the pictures because I was born in London and there were cinemas all over the place, and I used to go on in school holidays practically every day. And to get a cine camera to be able to make films, absolutely marvellous. So I got this cine camera and I went into Smith's, which was in the foyer of Epsom Station at that time, and I bought the magazine Amateur Cine World, ACW, which was the magazine in those days. It was about that size. And I read some most exciting things in there. The cine clubs got together and made films just like professionals. They had directors, cameramen, and I thought this is marvellous, fabulous. I must get in on this. So I went back to the manager in Woods, whose name was Kempton, very nice chap, and I said, where's the local cine club? I want to join, I want to get in with this. He said, well, there isn't one. So I said, well, what do I do? So he said, well, form one. Now, remember, I was 24 and broke. I said, really, I'm not the chap. I said, I don't know anybody. And he said, look, I'll give you a list of names if you push the boat out. So I said, okay, fine. So he gave me a list of names, and I was at Hawker's at that time. Dreadful firm. And I got one of the girls in the typing pool, which shall be nameless, to type these letters for me, and I sent them out. And we had an inaugural meeting at Ian Kempton's house in Meadow Walk in Ewell. And the chair at that meeting was taken by Professor Hewer, who was a zoological expert, and he was an expert on badgers, mostly badgers. And we had a man there called Harold Whedon. We had 2 or 3 other people there, and Kempton was there because it was his house, so we could hardly keep him away. And I thought, good, now we're going to start talking about making a film. What film are we going to make? And it wasn't like that at all, because you see, Humphrey Hewer was a professor and Harold Whedon was a top-flight businessman. And they said, no, before we can do any of that, we've got to have a constitution for the club. So I thought, well, this isn't what... Anyway, so we had 3 or 4 meetings, and the constitution was thrashed out, and we were finally at the stage when we could say, we've got to launch this. Anyway, they then decided to have a programme of lectures, but making films wasn't really talked about, and I thought, well, this isn't really my scene. And so I disappeared off the scene for a few months, and while my back was turned, they made a film on 16mm of the coronation celebrations in 1953, which had its premiere, its one and only showing, I think, at the Evesham Hall in the presence of the mayor. And Ian Kempton, who by that time was made secretary, stood up and said that unfortunately, for technical reasons, there are no titles on this film. And the reason, of course, that there were no titles, because the chap that had shot the titles, it wasn't Ian, who shall be nameless, had left the lens cap on. That's why. Anyway, I was, in just a few months after that, I was catapulted into being honorary secretary. It's a long story, I won't bore you with that. And I went along, and there were all these people sitting there. The lecturer hadn't turned up. Ian Kempton had come round to me and said, for goodness sake, they're all sitting there, go down and do something, because the lecturer hasn't turned up, and I can't go, and my father-in-law has died, or whatever it was. So I went down there, and there they all were, and they recognised me from being on the table at the inaugural meeting, and I said, Ian Kempton's asked me to come along to sort of get something going, and I said, I think what we ought to do, we ought to start making films.